When I'm doing recalls or I get the mix notes back and making the changes, I tend to be really conservative. If someone says, I want this louder, I'm not going to be like, oh, here's 6 dB for you. You know, I do it in really small increments. And I think Mike gets a little frustrated with that. You know, so he just decided, like, whatever you normally do, 3 of those. So do 3 ratties for that. And that's how he does it now. Give me 3 ratties, give me 1 ratty.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Record Process. This week we are really excited to bring you an extra special guest. We'll be chatting with an old friend and a longtime collaborator of mine, Mr. Vince Ratti. Vince actually produced and engineered an album called The Upsides, released by my band The Wonder Years all the way back in 2009. Since then, Vince has accumulated a long list of credits, including genre-defining records from bands like Circus Survive, The Menzingers, Quicksand, Movements, Title Fight, Me Without You, Mayday Parade, a Record Process alum, Citizen, Turnstile, and that's really just the start of it. So in late 2021, we finally reunited with Vince during the making of a brand new Wonder Years record, which we're hoping to release later this year. We reminisced about his old space at Skylight Studio, his work ethic early on in his career, and how Upsides came together all those years ago. Tom and I had a blast hearing about all of Vince's specific memories from that time period. We hope you enjoy it as much as we did, but before we get going, I want to take a quick second to shout out our amazing partners that are helping us bring this new season of The Record Process to you. First, I'd like to thank DistroKid, who has graciously offered to sponsor this season of The Record Process. DistroKid is the most affordable service for independent artists to distribute their music to all streaming platforms, and it comes filled with a suite of tools to help you elevate your career. DistroKid not only allows you to spread your music across the streaming ecosystem, and yes, that includes TikTok, but it also helps you share your story with labels via the Upstream tool. You can engage your fan base using its text messaging feature and even create unique lyric videos. Record Process listeners now have a chance to get 30% off the first year of their membership at DistroKid. Just head down to the show notes and sign up using our affiliate link. We can't wait to hear what you've been working on, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at truelevelstudio.com/The Record Process and share your release plans with us for the upcoming year. And now, here's our interview. Vince Ratti, welcome to The Record Process. Thank you so much for being here, dude.
Hey, man. It's good to see your face.
So good to see your face. Look at that. We got some faces. We got some stubble in the Zoom right now. We appreciate so much that you're here, and we want to talk about the Upsides, of course. Obviously, one of many. I'm a little biased on this one, admittedly, but one of a ton of records that you've had a hand in our genre and even further beyond. But being that we're on tour right now, playing that record through every night brings up some memories, and we wanted to kind of go back and put people in the time and place and space of it. So figured I'd have that conversation. Who better than the person that was in the pilot seat on that one? And
I was in a very small room with you when you did it. Yeah,
that's right. And we will go there. We will travel back. And the first thing that I kind of remember, so Tom was asking, initially, like, hey, how did you guys end up going to Vince, end up working with Vince on that record, which is a completely fair question. And, I gave it some thought. And actually, what's funny is we were chatting a little bit before this, and you did mention that we almost went with you, and we were maybe even booked to go with you to record the album before Upsides. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know how I scheduled it, if I knew that my band was going to be touring, but we found I had to cancel you guys, but you wanted Rachel, who sang in my band, who's now my wife, to do guest vocals. So the day we were leaving for tour, she did the guest vocals for Zombies.
Oh man. And
I sent that over and took off and hoped that everything was good with the file, fingers crossed, and we're off.
As it is, dude. Well, and also as anybody that is familiar with then the Upsides and one specific song on that, that was not the first time that we begged Rachel to extend her lovely voice to our band to make us sound a little bit better in any way possible. People still really like that song, Vince. I'll tell you what.
You know, we bought a car in like 2014, and the guy who was like our sales guy, his wedding song was that song.
Oh. I'd be lying if that was the first time I heard something like that, or we in general. And it still sounds weird to me, but also in that way, you're probably just like, funny story. We know a thing or two about that song. That's actually, you got married to Rachel's voice. That's amazing. So
do you remember how I pitched that song to you guys?
I have some vague memories, but you probably remembered a little bit more from I'd love to hear that. How did you pitch that song to us, Vince? Because I know how that song started.
Right. It was just like, was it ukulele? Is that what?
Soup bought a uke and had just been noodling around on it. So when we were writing that record, the first thing I ever heard before I heard any melody was those chords, him just kind of like, and admittedly he's grown, and he would admit this as well, like leaps and bounds. He was in no way a guitar player or any kind of like a stringed instrument player, as he would admit to his early work as a bassist with the Premiere. But so he bought that uke for fun, and I heard that progression of him like noodling around until finally he's like, hey, I'm kind of working on this. And it's amazing because that song and the energy of it just has this, it feels like it should have been like, feels like I was like, is this like something that like Zooey Deschanel is gonna like sing in New Girl or something? But I was like, but dude, like the song's incredible. Such a great idea. And then when we ended up in the studio, what happened, Vince?
Well, this was before the studio, right? Because I think you may have been the first band that I was like officially producer for the record. Normally, like for years, I just kind of play that role, but like, you know, people coming in don't know what a producer is. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to help you. You know, I help arrange the songs, help with parts, help write the melodies.
Yeah.
It was all just part of like recorded with Vince, you know?
Yeah.
But so we actually did some pre-production, and not with me. You guys sent me stuff. No, I did go over to Basement in South Philly, I think one time for one day.
I think for one day, I think very quickly, very briefly, actually. And I remember feeling like it was definitely, well, then, you know, like the row home basement on Manton Street, you know, that environment and what that was like. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But anybody that wants to see that, we later put out like an exclusive Manton Street 7-inch, and the house is actually on the cover. So if you can picture a extremely unfinished, small, dingy row home basement, that's what Vince walked into to be like, okay, let's hear these. So is that a rusty nail? Is that stable? And we were like, yeah, I don't know. It's, you know, it's probably fine. So I can imagine you probably just wanted to get the fuck out of there.
I remember it being fine. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure it was. I mean, we definitely did not care in any way. Tom and I have talked about this too, especially when we were kind of running back through this record and its origins and everything, where I feel like for us, a lot of really suspect like environments have always followed us for the writing process of most of our records. And that I feel like that kind of, I don't know, like desperation gets baked in somehow to like, whether it was like writing No Closer to Heaven, just like freezing because windows were blown out in the practice space behind like cold cuts that it was not insulated and only shared one wall with the building and had no heat. So like things like that. So not far off, we started off in that, that row home basement with that record. What was the pitch? What was your thought when you heard it? What was your remembrance of the take?
It was just a ukulele song. I said, do it like Goldfinger.
And we did.
It was like, someone's got to be like, like that on guitar. And it, you know, it was kind of a little out of character for you guys, but I think it worked, you know?
And I think it really did. And you know what's funny? I think about that now. I'm like, man, you were really hitting at the right time for me, because I was like, damn, have we talked about like our deep, like ska love that myself and Josh like played in ska cover bands, and like
wow.
And I was like, so probably that was an easy sell for a few of us, but then also the idea of, oh, this does have such a charm, but what if we kind of like keep that original ethos, set it up, and then go there at the end? And now I've got everybody like anytime I mention that song being like, oh, I love that, the trombone solo, who Matt Bellinger from We Are the Union, that was another like remote phone-in guest spot, and he wrote such a great solo, and it was everything we could have hoped for. And in that way, we were like, well, I feel like we definitely gotta, if we're doing upstrokes and doing this like floor tom kind of like Mosey, it's like we have to go all in with it. And luckily, I think you're right. It could have been that moment where, are we jumping the shark, right? Are we really stretching it too far? But there was something about the rest of that luckily, that I think that record and the lyrics and the way Dan was transitioning with the lyrics, there was still a lighthearted, overarching kind of energy to it, even though some of the themes were starting to shift, lyrically. So, and that's such like an honest song too in its own way. So I love, and I'm very happy, and I think a lot of other people are probably very happy. Maybe some upset. Maybe we're like, damn it, where's just the solo uke version of that? It's like it's out there somewhere, or go make it yourself and send it to me. I'm sure it's beautiful, but I am glad, and I'm so happy you brought that up, actually. So actually, let's talk about that then too. We were sending you pre-pro demos. Obviously, that one changed a little bit. Do you remember anything else? Like what Tom and I call hot takes when we're like, talking about demos or clients, maybe whether it be behind the scenes where you're just like leaning over to Rachel and just be like, this whole ending's got to go, or whatever. And I want that. And believe me, Wonder Years fans, and we know them like very well. None of them will like come for you with pitchforks if you're like, hey, I never liked this. That's actually kind of what I want, to show that there is this like cool push and pull. And especially as you like being in that producer role, it's like you went on to know that there's always a different differing of opinions, and that's totally okay. I know that years later we actually like came back and played you some demos from another record. I forget which one.
It was probably the next one. We were inside a van outside of like Red Robin or something.
That sounds right.
I had like a migraine, so I was always worried that like I wasn't super enthusiastic while you were playing it for me, because I feel like, listen to this, what do you think? But I thought it was great, but like also wanted to like vomit. So I didn't, but I don't know. I didn't tell you guys for some reason. I don't know.
Oh man. Okay. So, well, it's good to know. Maybe that's baked in. Maybe like Matt or somebody is just like, man, I really always felt like Vince hated that. I think we've gone way past any of that at this point, but it is really situational. And I feel like sometimes it's like there's more than, there's more factors at play than just like don't judge a gut reaction too quickly. If you're like expectations are like, please love it. So there's something to be said for that. So then what about the demos on Upsides?
There was one song, and I wonder if the emails are still like around. I forget which song it was. And I was just talking to Suki about it. And he knows the song. He knew exactly what I was talking about. I was like, I think my note back was like, if I have to wait this long for the song to really kick in, I won't.
I love that. Oh man, do you remember? Okay, we've got it. Maybe I'll make a note in the show notes to ask him if we can't.
My Last Semester, maybe? Does that sound like?
Oh, I mean, it starts the record. It kicks in pretty quick, so I feel like that wouldn't.
Well, something about me is I never really connect the names of the songs to the songs.
Well, because they're all probably working titles and different anyway when you get them, which is a funny thing. Yeah, I still like, luckily actually, so and we'll maybe touch on this later at the end, but full disclosure, we have been working with Vince on new stuff, and even that, I think you actually like the files were pretty aptly named. You know what I mean? Like they were all pretty close to what I assume. I mean, who knows, the 11th hour type stuff. When the track list is due, it's like there might be a change, but they were all pretty close where like, you know, at this point we have some ideas fleshed out way ahead of time. I'm sure that was not the case back then. But yeah, so I mean, that's a good one. And that's also like kind of just like a visceral hot take on that. I'll find out from Soup. I'm sure he'll remember what and put it in the show notes too, as a note.
And this is ridiculous of me, but like, you know, and I mostly listen to it just like driving around, like when I would have to go run somewhere. And I remember telling Soupy, I'm like, I feel like you say you're not sad anymore a lot. And like I didn't really like pick up at that's like a theme, you know. So whoops.
You know what? Maybe I love the alternate reality where we were just like, you're right. Maybe we should scrap it. As we're like currently literally designing production and everything, kind of, you know, and the that became the banner. Isn't that funny? But also, here's the thing: good, bad. You noticed it. You know, it was like it was definitely there. It was just a flip of like, is this good? Is this bad? And sure, it's like, this is kind of what I, you know, and Tom and I always say, it's like, if you don't realize something, you know, if it's okay, but it's like, do something intentionally, you know, if you're trying to elicit a reaction or trying to get it. And in that case, you were like, you know, maybe at least initially, you know, before you really got under the weeds and saw it take on life of its own, we're like, is this a thing, or what are, you know, like, do you realize this kind of thing, which is totally relevant and totally like a conceptual thing. And sometimes a band needs that to be like, yeah, no, we're steering into that, you know? So I'm glad we did.
Yeah. I didn't say to not do that. Yeah. I said, it seems like you do that a lot.
For all the pitchforks assembling in the comments, relax. Vince was on board. Yeah. Oh man.
Like, I just want to touch on like how the record started, like even before, like zooming out before the pre-pro demos that you were sending Vince. Can you touch on like just like a little background of like where all the writing started and how that kind of like specifically for the upsides?
Yeah. I mean, you know, a lot of that is, you know, out there in like Wikipedia and or interview lore, but like, generally speaking, we were all, you know, the majority of us were going to school in Philly. We were all in college. Soup was doing a lot of bike riding, as anybody that's read through any lyrics of his will probably be aware in that period of time. And it's kind of a snapshot of the city and a like transitional point of, I mean, you know, a lot of it you can probably tell kind of written in winter, just based, you know, and like a transitional month. If we're talking about songs like Logan Circle, you know, lyrically, there were themes in there it grapples with a lot, but for, you know, and he also has spoken to that, I'm sure, much better. But it was a thing where we had been slowly writing with the band and coming back home, like on weekends occasionally to play shows. But so it was kind of like a slow grow, and we had done a record before, like we talked about, you know, but it was on a very different end of the lyrical spectrum, Vince, which also I would have loved to know what the notes on that were, for you to be like, hey, do you guys realize that this is like both offensive and also just weird, like just like not even funny, just weird, you know. But I mean, we did make that record after all, as you know. But and
I remixed it.
And Vince remixed it. So there you go. Wow. Look at that. You really are at the nucleus of the Wonder Years fam, aren't you?
You're all my puppets.
Just for anybody, if in case anybody was wondering, I know like people are like talk about like Steve Evans, Joe Ciccarelli now. No, like Vince is the mastermind behind the brainchild. Go ahead. Take full credit, Vince. I totally back it. No. And that was pretty much it, in that there was a transition in kind of the direction and tone of the band too. So you can see that, like we mentioned with Upsides, where you're like, hey, you're like talking about this, like some kind of like sad shit, you know? It's like real. Like, do you want me to be feeling like things right now? What's going on? Like, you know, a couple years ago, it was all laughs. It was all a bit. And I think that comes with the time and place of college. Like late teens, early 20s, and a lot of those like kind of early life transitions, right? So that's kind of where the record landed from a thematic standpoint. And I think it has songs that ride that wave, that we were at. And then, yeah, it's like, Vince was always in the sights, sonically speaking too, but we also knew that we were open to some outside thoughts when it came to direction, arrangement, and we're acknowledging, hey, let's, we've done plenty of songs just by ourselves, in Matt's bedroom, Nick's basement. It was time to like put together something that felt a little bit more cohesive, honest, and real in that regard. And we're happy it ended up with Vince. But yeah, that was pretty much it. And then I guess it was in the summer that we were tracking that, right?
Yeah. And I remember we did, I think it took 2 weeks, or that's what we were scheduled for. By that point, like before you guys got in, I was working so often that I was just really burnt out. There was one night I remember after we were recording, and it was only 2 weeks, but like maybe after the first week, I remember it was like on a weekend and I went home for dinner and I didn't go back. That's the way I remember it. And it's not because of you guys. I was just so overworked in my life. And I remember asking Soupy, I'm like, why did you guys book like 2 weeks straight? Why didn't we take off weekends? And he said, you wanted to do that. I'm like, oh shit, that was a bad idea. But
oh man, wow. There is so much to touch on and dig into, like talk about life and the story and journey of, I mean, if you're listening to this, we should have like a, like an emotional trigger warning if you're in any kind of like audio engineer or professional that's worked in this, because what you just described is something that I have seen every other person that we work with and have worked with since then. And I've seen it in myself and Tom, and we've had plenty of conversations about trying to avoid burnout, but also kind of burnout is inevitable if you're trying to grind and have a lot of projects coming in and have goals and don't want to be turning things down. I'm glad we weren't on that chopping block, but also, yeah, dude, that's a huge thing. And now I've seen this even moving forward. There will be times where, because we were pulling such long hours, also, aside from the fact we got to get into this, where how anybody now, the idea of doing an entire full length like that in 2 weeks, that's cruel and unusual punishment to someone like you that has, that again, you should know. There was no assistant. There was no additional team. There was no one doing prep, dude. That is absolutely bonkers to think about that. And I almost feel like we owe you an apology, even though we didn't realize it at the time.
I did it to myself.
But apparently you did it to yourself.
Yeah.
But that's a real big thing too, where.
But you guys have always been easy.
Oh, well, now you're just blowing smoke, Finn.
But that's interesting because there are three of you that do production, and that could be tricky, but you've always been easy. Everything I've done, because I think I mixed 2 acoustic EPs. We did the remix, the new stuff, all easy. It's always the small bands that get me.
Well, and you'd also probably not be alone. I've heard that one once or twice too on a couple memes recently when I venture into the internet worlds. So, but the fact that you acknowledge that, whether or not it was you or someone looking you in the face, be like, you gotta chill for like an hour, is huge. And also like not coming back even a couple hours, it was like preserving sanity, because who knows how that would manifest itself the next day when it's just like, I'm not me when I'm hungry and sleep deprived. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, like a weird twisted alternate Snickers commercial, but so I'm glad. And I've even seen, Evitz will do this from time to time when it's the same thing. It's like, dude, especially like guitar players, you're sitting there like noodling and doing the tone questing on the floor. And then you look up and you're like, oh, we said we just finished this one song and now it's like 4 a.m. And I told the singer that, he should come in at like 10 tomorrow, and then the schedule shifts as you go through a record where you're like, okay, we're going to start an hour later. Everybody needs sleep, or even just to be like, hey, honestly, I think on a few of the records, at least he's acknowledged, and we've totally understood too, to be like, yo, I need a day off. I know it wasn't scheduled, but it's going to be cool. We'll figure it out. We'll get somebody else to come in, keep moving on this or that. But yeah, and it's totally relevant. And I'm glad you did, because surviving that much tracking in 2 days straight with no breaks for the ears, for your mindset, it's crazy.
Well, yeah, but I was doing it for years before that record, and for some after, it was too much. So I mean, I only mix now, and it's I'm a lot more sane, but I'm still tired. I have a 6-year-old, but I haven't slept for like the last 6 years, coincidentally. So.
Right. I was going to say now you have a different reason. It's no longer some local bands that are spinning you around the corners with like a novella of mixed notes. Yeah. So relevant. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for putting that effort and time in. I think that's no surprise. Like people in that position, you loved what you did. And so you were just, burning the candle on both ends and then kind of just throwing it into the fireplace, even. So appreciate it. I think it worked out okay in the end.
So Vince, can you talk a little bit more about, like, Casey kind of touched on of like what Skylight was like, more on like how the studio itself kind of like shaped how the record came to be, or like if there's like, oh man, like, I think Case was mentioning like the wall mount AC unit, like in it, and like you haven't turned on, turned off, and like clearly,
oh yeah,
I know that pain, but like, was there like any like weird thing that like you're like, oh yeah, this is that sound on the upsides because like I don't know, it had to be that sound.
Yeah. Well, so the studio was basically like my parents' garage. It was built on as a studio because I learned this from my father, who was into it, and so that was his space. But yeah, it was one room. We had the wall mount air conditioner and baseboard heater. I remember we had Soupy in the corner, facing the corner, and I had treated the corner of the room. It was weird that we picked the corner because that's where like all the low frequency go.
Right.
But I didn't know that then. But I had like bass traps there and stuff just because they would eat up some of the sound, because I wanted it to be dead. It was a very live room with a lot of flutter echo too in the right place. Yeah, that's how we did it. And we probably like draped some mic stands with some moving blankets behind him if I had to go.
Oh, 100%. That's the image that I have. Yeah, we made like a nice little like tent type scenario that he would walk into. Yeah. Yeah.
So he sang into the corner of that room, which is probably a super weird choice, but I think it came out good. I think we did a good job. And I think for the next record, Soupy was used to recording with me. And I guess Evitz was probably doing that one. He's like, I don't know. This is so weird. I'm like, please do not miss singing into the corner of my parents' garage. It's ridiculous. You're going to do great.
Oh man, singers, they just, and also it's a comfort factor. And I think, dude, and so this is the other reason that I wanted to touch on this too, because for so many years and so many records, you were cutting vocals with the vocalists like right in the same room. They weren't like 50, 100 feet away through like double pane glass and to the left, all isolated in a dark like ISO booth somewhere. I mean, this was a makeshift ISO booth, but like much different in that, I don't even know if you were using a talkback at the time because you're just like in the same room, or if it was just kind of like turn around, take the cans off and be like, that was good. Pull back a little bit on this,
I used to use a talkback because I used to have a console. But this would have been all just, computer and outboard gear. But yeah, just headphones off. Yeah. And it was really annoying. And then the thing where you put the headphones around your neck and you forget that it's there for maybe 20 minutes while you're working, and suddenly you realize something's like been squeezing your neck and you go, and you throw the headphones off.
Yep. Wow, that memory. I feel like I actually, even cutting guitar and stuff, remember that, where you're just, I'm like, are you okay? Just like, yeah, no, I'm good. That's probably what that was. But from a singer standpoint, and because I think being relaxed and comfortable as a vocalist, especially when you're tracking a lot of ups and downs, dynamics, whatever style, really, it's like the person that you're doing it with, there's like not only a trust, but like a workflow that is really important to get into, as you know and have seen. And so for him, like, especially, when bands go from different people, making records with different people, sometimes that process changes. Sometimes you find things that work better. Sometimes you're like, hey, I don't know. And for Soup, all of a sudden he was in a vocal booth by himself, and he wasn't, he was still probably cumulatively at Steve's spot the same distance that he was from you in the control room, because Steve's booth is right behind him. But like, that was enough of a shift to be like, I don't know, it just feels like more professional and real and like sterile than me just be like, all right, cool, let's cut it, And it's funny too, because a couple of the tracks that we have just worked on together more recently, we did with another person who likes to have vocalists do the same thing, cut it right there on the board with their 47. So, and there's something to that like some, again, everybody's different, but I love that we kind of like started out with that, and that you did that for so many years, and you probably like, there are pros to that side of the coin, being that close, and just, you feel like anybody that's there is just in the trenches with you, Yeah,
I can reach over and hold his hand if he needs it, or,
Exactly. Yeah. Here's a tissue. I know it's getting a little heavy right now, but I wanted to bring that up again too, because that is at True Level, that's kind of the same setup that we do. And there has been like a strength in that a lot of times. It's not always perfect or the same thing. You're just like, crap. That other pair of cans on the couch was on for the last like 5 takes. And I have also done this as well. And this is the other thing why I mentioned the AC unit, because you, and maybe you can talk about this, having to get so close, especially in the summer. Skylight, quite literally, as aptly named, had a massive skylight. So if the sun was out and it was in the summer, it would get pretty warm in there if the AC was not going for a while. So you would have a nice flow.
Yeah, especially if you're like a drummer or something.
Right. And even a vocalist too, like just in general. And drums, the noise floor, obviously, if you forget that, the AC's on for a take and Michael's just smashing, you might be okay and could probably maybe get away with that. But for a vocal, a little different.
Or, with the AC, like it had an oscillating directional thing that would oscillate out. So it could blow onto the mics. So I've done that before accidentally, where like, yeah, you won't hear it, but if the mics have the air blowing against the capsule, it's like,
right,
for like a small amount of time.
Yeah,
it's not, I don't think it's on the upsides, or maybe it is. I don't know.
I mean, I don't hear it, but chalk it up to color and character if it is. But that's, but these are the things too, and so much of the show, like the detail behind this, these are, like I said, the things that you got used to, like they weren't ideal, but the workaround was, okay, let's do vocals, AC off, let's work on a verse. Okay, cool. Then you would comp, and turn the AC on. Okay, cool. Take a breather for like 10, 15 minutes. Right. That was kind of the workflow. Right.
And there's probably a lot of weight between takes, which could be good or bad depending on who you are. Because the way I used to like to work is, I think now what I assume is most people will do a bunch of takes and probably do the comps and edits and tuning later. But I would do everything as we were doing it, so that as the song was moving along, we knew what we had. We didn't have to guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So as we move on to the next, the first chorus, we know how the first verse sounds.
Yeah.
Right?
No, honestly. And there's something so, I'm glad you brought that up, dude. There's something so relevant about that in terms of a committal mindset, right? To like going back to like the tape days, and we've had plenty of these conversations with someone like Steve Evans, who started on, like his days on tape, and just having that approach baked into his DNA to be like, no, we're getting the sound and we're printing it, which is a lot different than how some records nowadays, and even some that, that you're mixing too, are getting made. And maybe it's like a happy medium, but from a vocal standpoint, it's really important to know that the vocalist likes it, right? Because then what happens, and I've seen this, and I'm sure Tom, you've seen this plenty, where someone will go home, you'll be like, yeah, we feel really great. I think you smashed it. Then they'll hear like the rough bounce, the first mix, like 2 weeks later after everything else is on it, and be like, I really don't like the way I said this word. It's like, well, that's how you said the word on like all 10 takes, it's like, and they, if you weren't there and be like, hey, in the moment, does this work? Do you feel great about this? Did we get it? That's actually awesome, because then you're not, and this is a really important thing sometimes too, you're not like asking them to suspend, their trust or belief and be like, But when I tune it and then edit it and then, sync up all the doubles, trust me, it's going to sound great, and sometimes if people have a track record, right. And at this point, people were like, well, I know Vince, I trust him because I know he's done it 1,000 times. So, okay, cool. But that, early on, yeah, you're probably working with bands where it's easier to do it that way. And now it's a little different.
Yeah. And some bands, it could be that if we weren't doing a lot of vocal takes, or maybe the singer isn't, that great, or, sounds great, but has hard time hitting notes. You want to know that when you go in and you help those notes a little bit and you tune them a little bit, that it's going to work. And I never really liked hearing the tuning, which is now a very modern sound, even if you're not going for like the very hard tune, I always thought it was important to know that it was going to sound natural. And I wasn't going to know that unless we were doing it,
And also as like a contract, just having worked through so many records now, in that regard, you then start to see, and I mean, even with Wonder Years, we've seen, it's like everything that comes after it, you're kind of referencing back to the other things that are laid down. So if you're cutting harmonies, like it is sometimes helpful to be like, hey, here's a better guide, like track to this. Don't track to a harmony where that note is just like kind of scoops in a little bit. Because then I'm going to have to try and do the same tune maneuver on like the harmonies to get them to lock in. And then you almost give yourself more work. It's kind of like tracking everything to unedited drums or like really raw, like kind of, flowy takes. And then having to go back and be like, oh, well, now I kind of have like exponential amounts of editing work to do to make this feel real. Whereas if I just started, with a finalized, drum performance, everything would fall in line a lot easier. So dude, I mean, and that's not bad. It's funny too, that like with only 2 weeks that we were doing it that way. Cause now I picture it and I'm like, it would have been a hurry up and go. Like there's so many notes on this thing. I don't know how we're going to get it done in 2 weeks.
I wonder if we really did it in 2 weeks. We have to ask Sue.
I mean, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it definitely was quick though. I know that for sure. I'm sure we marathoned it.
And, since it was in the garage, we had to be done by like, 8 or 9 o'clock, right?
100%. And so that's also any, talking about like home studios or like noise things. I'm just like, there's a certain time where it's like your hours are grandfathered by this. Actually, funny enough, a mutual friend who you do a lot of work with and we've known because of you. And I actually wonder if it was a couple covers that we later did, but Will Yip at Studio 4 has that pub upstairs, and so much so that there was so much bleed where when they would do club nights, he's like, the bass through the floor, I just can't, after like 9 p.m. on Fridays, I can't do any vocals out there or whatever, you know what I mean? And I was like, if anybody knew that this studio had that problem with all the gold records on the wall and history here, I love it. That shit kind of never stops, right? Amazing.
Right before that, you were talking about drums and like Vince, it was a single room studio, and like I've had Michael drum 5 feet away from me. How did you manage that? What was that like for this record?
I don't know. I don't remember that being any different than what, I was doing before or after. Probably when we were getting the drums, we were only going for the drums. Although if I had to guess, Matt and Casey were playing along, maybe Josh.
I think there might have been some scratch stuff down there, but I would have to imagine that we probably, I don't think we were playing like, unless it would have been DI'd in, but I don't even think we were doing that.
Yeah, it would have been DI'd in, but I don't think I did a lot of recording the scratch guitars and then playing the drums to the click and the scratch stuff. So we probably had you guys going direct on each take.
Yeah,
that's a guess.
And honestly, what's interesting is I'm not sure. That feels like how we would have opted to do it, but that's in hindsight. I'm sure Matt would probably remember too, and because it would have probably even still back then just been like a human metronome when it comes to rhythm guitar playing, but and still is to this day. That's what happens when you have a band with 3 drummers. So you have a leg up on the timekeeping. But yeah, and here's the thing too. Michael is a smasher. You know this.
Yeah, but that was mainly what I recorded was like smashers.
So you had reps on it, so you knew how to deal with things like that. And this is getting a little bit more into like the audio, like engineering realm, you know, for anybody that's familiar with that. But
well, one thing I remember about that I just remembered about Michael and drums is when we were doing like, you know, pre-pro and stuff, I was really trying to sell him on 4 on the floor beats when I could get him to do it. And I think the only place he kept it was on backpacks for like just like in the chorus for like just a very short moment. He gave it to me.
I remember that. Yes, I do. And then because that wasn't there, because it was much more of a groove. Wow, I love that. What a little Easter egg. You're totally right. Also, that was like the straightness of Hey Thanks and like the swing, which yeah, now that the more I think about it, Vince was just like, listen, I just got this fever in me from this like Dancy Zoloff stuff right now. I think you guys could use some of this fever. And you were right. I mean, that's and I for that reason kind of always remember listening back to the final versions of Backpacks and the spot that you're talking about. And then in the hook where I was just like, oh, who would have thought that like 4 on the floor could have such a good groove? But when everything else around it has these kind of like syncopated like pop punk accents, it's great.
So he was right to use it in a really small amount because then it's way more effective.
Yeah, the best of both worlds. We call that collaboration and we love it. Oh man, yeah, you're totally right. I mean, what's funny enough is I'm going to try to find, it's one of my favorite like weird talk about like all the things you'll see it like the Instagram like post like the, you know, the first photo from the library on your phone or whatever. Literally one of the first that somehow still is in my like iCloud of Michael, and I know this because I went back for something years ago, is a crazy like weird, not even good, like blurry out of focus phone picture that was probably taken on what, like at that point, was it my Motorola, it was probably like a Nokia or maybe like the literal, like the first iPhone, whatever it was at that point, of Michael with the sun just like beating down at the perfect angle through him.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that photo. I remember that photo too.
Yeah. And I was like, that kind of perfectly embodies. I'm going to have to dig some of these up and maybe, God forbid, put them somewhere in the show notes or up online, because I think it also puts it in a nice time and place thing for everybody. But I always do love that photo because it is kind of just very much him in that world. And you can, for anyone interested, you can see the setup of the kit too. But what kit was it? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
Okay, well, it's in the photo. I have a feeling, I want to say, was it the SJC, like the kind of turquoise, sparkly SJC kit way back then?
I couldn't tell you what any of the gear that you guys used was.
Well, I can tell you what some of it was because somebody recently asked me about this online. I was playing back then I still have it, the Mesa triple rectifier, all very like high gain modern. They were all around. They were really, they had their moment in our like floor show world for sure in the 2000s. And then Matt had like a 6505, like a kind of like PV, like 5150 style thing that he still has, and we still use that. Dude, that's a great workhorse thing and even like the low key secret of like clean sounds and whatever. But I feel like that was probably the majority of what we used from a guitar standpoint. I
don't think we changed tones a whole lot.
Judging by the record, probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I was used to making records where like, this sounds good. This is the sound of the record, you know, except for like stuff where it's got to be clean or specific, more crunchy kind of tone. No.
Well, and you know what I think too about that, which speaks to how like the breakneck pace that we had to do it at, and how much time you were like, hey, this band's coming in to do this record. It's like we don't have the time or budget to like try and set this tone up, play around with this tone. You know, it's like it's nice that we've gotten there over the years and have been able to like stretch that out a little bit. But early on, sometimes you're just like, I need to find something that gets the message across. And cool, let's just get the parts. Let's get the takes, you know? And it's kind of that juxtaposition of they're both important, right? Especially for you as a mix engineer. it helps a record flow in a different way and helps each song stand out. But also it's like the parts, it's like if the arrangement and the song itself is good, you know, then okay, that's the bigger thing if we only have X amount of time to get everything tracked. So that probably has a large hand in how the record came out, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm pretty lazy, so we just let everything ride.
Hey, honestly, it's Vint, dude. I'm gonna get you a T-shirt made that just says "Let It Ride."
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wonder how different it would have been if we had the time to dial in all the different sounds. Because when you know, when you have a different tone, it changes the way you play into it. You know,
right. Taking a moment to let you know that this episode is also brought to you by Band Builder Academy. Band Builder is a training platform and resource library that helps musicians understand how to convert strangers into fans, get higher visibility on streaming platforms, and understand how to uniquely market themselves in order to build long-term relationships with their audience that can sustain and grow a career the right way. That's right, I said the right way, because we know there's a lot of noise out there right now, and it's easy to get wrapped up in chasing vanity metrics and lose sight of what really makes you stand out as an artist. This is a core belief that I share with Todd McCarty, founder of Band Builder and longtime label manager and sales executive at Fearless Records and Sony Music. With the time I spend coaching a number of developing artists, I've seen just how powerful a tool like Band Builder can be in helping musicians stay organized, plan their releases, and make the most out of the time they dedicate to their craft. So for a limited time, Record Process listeners can get 10% off a new membership at bandbuilderacademy.com by following the link and instructions in the show notes. So if you're serious about growing your knowledge and fan base the real way, then do not sleep on this offer.
When they were coming in and they had all the tones and it was pedal to the metal, Vince, was there any part guitar wise that from arrangement standpoint that you were like, this isn't working, or like, oh man, I have to edit the crap out of this, or anything like
tear us apart, Vince? Full license.
No, I wish I could. I don't think so. I taught Matt a new kind of guitar technique for him, and I forget what song it was, but it was tap harmonics.
Oh, cool.
So like when you fret a note, and then when you tap the note, but you don't really tap the note, you just lightly touch it, and it makes a harmonic. And I had him playing sort of like some melodies with that. I forget what song he does that on. It was like a cleanish type tone. Maybe it was crunchy. Can't remember.
Case.
Matt will definitely, I'm going to go, you know what? This is nice. I have a working list of things that I have to go fact check after this. That will be some good rehearsal conversation fodder for, you know, the bus or right before this comes out. So I'll check on that. But see, I love that too, because that's a thing where that's a little cool thing where maybe that's like a little kickflip that you've probably put into some either other songs before us or Zoloft, or where's, Did you use that in play before? Like, I mean, obviously it's, you know, it's a guitar technique. You're a guitar player, but
I don't think so. But I was in high school, I was like in the shred guitar, you know, so I knew all the guitar tricks, you know.
What was your favorite shred song? Put you on the spot here.
Oh, I don't know. But, you know, there was a guitar player, or I think he's still alive, Jason Becker. And when he was like 17, he was like kind of like this, to people that were really into guitar playing, it was like super famous. And he used to, this is so corny, but like he would play Eruption with one hand, the tapping part of Eruption with one hand, and a yo-yo in the other. So I learned to do that.
This is something 100% that LJ, our guitar tech, needs to find and may literally never shut up about if he finds this video. So I'm going to go find that. I'm going to put it in. I couldn't
do the yo-yo part, but I could do the one hand tapping part when I was like, you know, in high school. And
I'm putting that in as Yo-Yo Eruption for myself to go find as a gift to LJ later on. But yeah, well, and also what's cool about that is like, So even though stylistically we weren't, we weren't making scene metal or like virtuoso metal, we were far from virtuoso, as Vince is too kind to say. But even though I tried to bait him on, but we know it, we've come a long way. Let's put it this way: I don't think we would have had great results if we tried to do with Upsides what we did with Sister Cities, which was track like 80-90% of it as a band live, like on the spot. We're not cut out to do that at that point yet. Or, I mean, we could have, it would have sounded a little different. But you took a bunch of those things from like your kind of shred background, and which definitely, like, from a tone standpoint, from knowing what, like, tracking, articulation, I think that's important that you were a guitar player, because so much of that music, and this record as well, was very high gain guitar, so if there was stuff like me playing a like Washington Square Park, right, like, and that's got like chunks, chugs, like stylistically it's like, I'm sure that there were plenty of times where you're like, no, we got to a little cleaner, a little more crunch. You knew what you were listening for,
as far as guitar tones, like I don't think I was making anyone ever go for super metal sounds. I was into like indie rock for, many years, like a decade before that. But, it probably helped when I would have metal bands coming in.
Yeah. Well, and just in general, that too, it's like, I guess what we're saying is you're very well versed across genres. So you're set up to make a lot of decisions. So it's kind of no surprise, I think, that you landed and shifted to a lot of the mixing stuff, because it requires an understanding of almost kind of the entire range, and more of this like almost genre objectivity of like understanding what's common there, but understanding, how to bring out certain things to make it really nice and make those choices. And that was probably starting there. And I'm sure, it was a little easier because we, aside from songs like Hey Thanks, kind of had the lane that we were going for. So we knew what the target was. But I think that all plays a part, and we knew you were a guitar player. So we were more comfortable, taking feedback or trying tricks from a guitar player. Just like a drummer is like sometimes a little more receptive if they know that a tip or, feedback is coming from a drummer that they, kind of respect. So, I know that plays a big role in it sometimes too, for us. And I remember it doing so. So, yeah, we were talking about, some of the guest spots, obviously, your wife, Rachel, who sang in Zoloft. We had her do the guest vocal spot on Hey Thanks. There were some other guest vocals though that we had to phone in, and I'm curious if you remember pulling that in, or what time and place, or how we tried to do that.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that was going to happen, and it was in bar bands, right?
Right.
Okay. So I think you wanted to have Shane do a line, and
absolutely.
Shane, I did a lot of Valencia. Lived close, so he came over. So I had Shane do this epic big thing where there's like 100 Shanes and it's overlapping, and and I was like, oh guys, this is great, listen to it. And you're like, no, just the one line. It's going to be a lot of other people.
Oh no. I'm sure you don't have the files for this anymore.
I might.
Yeah, dude, that's worth, even if it's just on the back end for us, so I can call Shane and have and thank him for his time, which should have been like about 10 minutes for one line, but seems like it was a little bit more. I would love to hear that. But yeah, so there was more where we were like, no, it's friends, plural, right?
I had him going through the whole ending of the song too. I don't remember. Maybe I should try to dig it up.
Yeah. I think you should. I think it would definitely be a very worthwhile find if you can.
File sharing for audio wasn't as like big of a thing for production. So some of the files that I got of those guest vocals, one was like, is an MP3 that's like all wavy and like crazy in the high end, like, and that's what it is on the record.
Oh, whose was it? Honestly, was it
I don't even remember everyone that was on there.
Well, I do. So it was not Shane, because we know you tracked Shane's.
Yeah.
So it was either Nick from Man Overboard, and who I feel like at that time, because he had been recording a lot and obviously still does. So I feel like his probably wouldn't have been an MP3, but Lord help him if it for some reason was. And I'm going to get him on the horn real quick over at Gradwell now, and have a laugh about it. But the other ones, so I mean, Maddie Arsenault, the singer for A Loss for Words, was also always bringing hype to the track, anything in that era and beyond. He was in there. I don't know. I feel like he would have found someone up in Boston that had a studio to do it, but that also doesn't mean that it didn't come out as an MP3. Jamie from Title Fight was also
may have been Jamie.
That honestly sounds like the most punk. Be like, hey, fucking, here's an MP3. I don't care. Who knows? No, but that's awesome. And so we did have everybody do it. And that was a cool idea. I think it was, we wanted to, that was also an era for, guest vocals and, and these are all bands that, we had been playing with anyway. So, and also Dave from Fireworks, Least I Forget, who we did so much touring with and love those guys. So I don't remember what order they came in to us, but I do love, and over the years too, there have been times where we've crossed paths or had like one of them come and do the ending, which has also become like a cool thing, which there have also been plenty of people, Laura Stevenson being one of my favorites, that has graciously filled in and played the part of Rachel whenever we, a couple times when we've played Hey Thanks live. So that's always a fun thing too, having a guest spot that we can kind of fill or bring out other friends, or sometimes, with bar bands, we've, we'll bring other people, from the bands that would, someone will just like, it's like halfway into the tour and be like, hey, I love bar. Like, can I like sing one of the lines at bar band? It's just like, you waited until halfway through the tour to ask. Come on. Like, so that's always super fun too. And sometimes it takes us by surprise. There have been times where bands are just like, we have no idea it's happening. They're just like, instead of being like, yo, we're going to stage dive, just be like, come up and be like grabbing a mic and be like, oh, sick, own this. Yeah. Okay. No, I like that. Yeah. I like that energy. So that has honestly created, I'm glad it came together and people were able to like phone it in, even though it would have been honestly amazing for it to be just Shane, like a Shane outro, which I fingers so crossed that we find it. But yeah, I think I do love that we were able to source all of those in an era where, sending files was not as ubiquitous as it definitely is now.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it in a while, but I don't remember it sounding too bad in the end.
Hey, I think it worked. It did the job.
You have this 2-week bout of everyone's going through hell, and you have the record after 2 weeks. After it left your hands and like it's out in the world, and now they're doing like all of this awesome touring, et cetera, et cetera. What's the like? Did like this record come back and like 5 years later, like a band was like, oh yeah, Upsides? I guess what was the professional like outcome of this record for you, and like has it grown over time, or is it?
I did so many pop punk bands.
It came back to haunt him in so many ways,
and it was really fast.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of local bands, and it was a really good pool of local talent. Like I think people would be surprised how many bands that they like came from the small area. A lot of bands that they, wouldn't know were all from the same area, like you guys, like Circa,
Balance and Composure,
right. Title Fight, Tiger's Jaw. They were a little bit more north, but we'll count them.
We'll count Scranton. We'll count the Scranton crew. Yeah.
But and it was really fast. And then, for a few years after, people still really cited the Upsides. But that could hurt too, because a band's going to sound like how they sound. And I don't think maybe young bands would kind of realize that. They'd be like, well, we're going to this guy's going to sound like the Upsides, but maybe they don't sound like you guys.
Yeah. They're not writing songs like that.
And, and as like you guys kind of took off, and a lot of some of the other bands I'd worked on, bands would start coming from further away. And I would feel guilty. And I would let them know, I'm like, you're coming to like this really small room. I just wanted to let you know that you're in for a lot of discomfort and awkwardness. And I would always try to like cut them the best rates that I could, because I felt bad that they're coming from so far. Like Citizen came from Ohio. Rachel sang on one of their songs on their first thing.
Right.
I set them up with you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Because their demos were awesome. And they had nowhere to place to stay. I'm like, let me see what the Wonder Years are, if they could like house you. And I sent over their demo. Like, yeah, these guys are great.
Yeah, I remember that too. Actually, that was the one where I was just like, I know for a fact, because I remember they were coming in from out of town, and you're like, I don't know where they can stay, like what, but whatever. So that was a good example. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. Sorry, not sorry, but also, yeah, that's just like, I'm glad to hear. And yeah, so you just it got busier in its own way beyond that, which is super cool. And yeah, I love that stuff like that. It got pulled in where Sis now like sounds very and have evolved, very differently. But even those initial demos, it was like, oh wow, very cool. I love that this is like in that realm and that world, and came to get that ratty stamp. Also, very quickly, and because then we're going to transition to where we are now, like present day, and some stuff that we did recently together. Talk to me about what a ratty is, Vince, in terms of a unit of measure, because I think, in people coming to you and you having your own ideas, philosophies, and even though every record's different, there are some things about your now like mix process and like post process that I find very interesting. So I just want to get a little bit of clarity on this and put this out there for our listeners, because I've recently come across this nugget.
So there are two producers that I work frequently with, Will Yip and Mike Sapone. And your listeners probably know Will, probably, because he's done a lot of records that people loved. And I'm lucky that he lets me work on them also. And Mike Sapone did like a lot of the Long Island bands. He did like all the brand new records. We did science fiction together, Taking Back Sunday, Stray Late Run, and lots of other cool records.
Yeah, look up his discography, both discographies, and you can oogle at those for a while. Scroll and oogle. Both, yeah, a ton of records in our world for sure.
Yeah, when I'm doing recalls or I get the mix notes back and making the changes, I tend to be really conservative. If someone says, I want this louder, I'm not going to be like, oh, here's 6 dB for you. I do it in really small increments. And I think Mike gets a little frustrated with that. So he just decided like, whatever you normally do, 3 of those. So do 3 ratties for that. And that's how he does it now. Give me 3 ratties. Give me 1 ratty.
Oh man. And I know this too, because we've been having some conversations recently on some stuff that you've been mixing for Wonder Years. And we've obviously had some back and forth discourse. We've pretty much compiled a novel in Slack at this point, and which I feel like I should save that for some like years from now. Like, hey, this is going to be me, and I'm going to like tentatively go back through the actual flow of back and forth discourse on how the record, got mixed with your permission. Of course, we can, we can blank anything out. But even just to have that, because now realizing it's like Slack was not a thing. It was, hey, here's an email. Try and keep track of them. They're all coming in different, as single different emails with stupid subjects. Probably 15 years ago. I love that, because that everybody has their own thing, and now especially we talk a lot about communication, whether it's with your own band or someone that you're working with. And I love the idea that you've kind of scooted into something that the people that you work with behind the scenes are like, cool, we understand how you work, and now that and I think that's really important too. But also in terms of like things that you've established and grown over your career, I want your take specifically on this as we're moving forward, because when we did the Upsides Suburbia like box set re-release, we did 2 new tracks that you worked with us on, because we were like, well, it's only fitting that, Vince was there and did Upsides. And these are 2 songs that we resurrected from like phone notes. And we're very just like, pretty much just like fuller fragments that were sitting around, on the chopping block or drawing board somewhere, and went back in, like dusted it off, and then found like, oh, what is this? And thought it would be a cool homage to the things and the mindset that we were in that, back then, but with the same people at the helm, and finish those songs now. And I'm curious, now we did this in from a process standpoint, a very interesting way, because Steve Evans was also involved in like remotely producing. We piped him into a studio in Philly, whether it was via FaceTime or whatever, and transferred a lot of things, sessions and everything back and forth very quickly over a couple days. What was your overall take? And if you, I know this is a kind of broad question, but having, done that initial record, Upsides, and being familiar with the band and what we were doing till now, and then getting those tracks to mix and seeing like having that behind the scenes, like these are the files, these are the raw tracks. What were any of your takeaways in terms of like a then from now and differences or similarities that you notice?
I really love the songs, and I wish that they could have been on the Upsides.
Me too,
they would have been
honestly.
strong songs on the Upsides. And, or, maybe we would run out of time, been like, nope, we'll do it again in 15 years,
Right. Totally.
Disappointingly, I don't think I had a whole lot of takeaway from working on those, from seeing those files. The drums were recorded well. I liked that. The way Soupy sings sounds so effortless, I think. And I don't know. I didn't mix it with any mindset that like, this should be like the Upsides. I just, do what I normally do. And from a technical standpoint, that song's weird and different because it's the only song I've mixed. I've got an Overstayer compressor that's on the floor right here next to me. It's the only record that it's been on when I got it. And it does this harmonic thing where it has a lot of harmonics, but it also gives this like boost in the highs and the lows. So you're effectively cutting the mids, right? Relatively speaking. So I put that on your mix bus. And it did cool things to the lows and the highs, but the guitars and I didn't even really know that's exactly what it was doing. Only that like, well, the guitars are kind of gone, but it feels good. Let's roll with it. And that's what those two songs are. But I decided that I don't like it on anything. A lot of people probably think it's great, but it's like I said, it's on the floor next to me.
So it had one quick cameo. Well, it's either on the floor because you use it all the time and you want it right there, or because it's been relegated. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I'm glad we could be the
great piece of gear. I'm sure people would love it. It's not for me.
I mean, you can send it down to Atlanta if you want, or send it up to Philly if it's, if you need the floor space. But that's interesting.
Sorry, that's not the story you were probably looking for, but
no, but you know what? But it's the story we got. So it's the story I was looking for, because that's actually kind of cool and relevant. You definitely didn't have that back then. And you definitely didn't have, I'm sure, a lot of the toys that I have just had a sneak peek that we will have to talk much more about in the future. But that didn't stop you from making a record. I think, was it
Alan?
You know what? I will tell you right now. Right? No, you did not. I think, was it Bill?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. No, it was Bill Henderson at Azimuth Recording, I believe. Yeah. So it wasn't yet Alan, actually. Alan Douches, who we've done a lot of stuff with over the years too. But yeah, I mean, it came out like the records were sounding in that era. And I went back and was just like, it's loud, it's got energy. And that was kind of like, at that point, we were like, great, loud energy. And, we approve the mix. It's the, that's the effort that those were the songs that we had in mind, when we were.
Yeah. We did the best we could with, that we could at the time, and
I think, and you know what, I think what is really interesting about that, Vince, and I guess we'll kind of leave on this note too, is, and I'm sure you find this still to this day in the process when you're mixing stuff, there's sometimes a very nice benefit to having a scope of time and like kind of either a fire lit under you creatively so that things just can't, continue to like spiral into, well, it's never done, it's never perfect. Cause that's kind of like the perfection, become, paralysis, so to speak, with something. And for us back then, we were much younger. We were very primed to go in, not overthink something and just be like, yeah, and I think that comes across on that record. And I think that's actually a really important thing, that we didn't have too much time to think about it, whether it was where we were as a band, and we were just like, yeah, this is definitely better than anything we've done before. That was enough. It checked the box. Let's get it out. I think there is something to that. Now we, I think with like new records that we put even more continued thought into it, you know, the songwriting, but also there's still this, and we talk about this a lot, it's a key theme on this, and trusting like the instinct and gut wherever you are in your life or your career. And I love that we were able to be in there in that moment where when you're just going, you're just like, you're making how many decisions, you know, it's like an overwhelming between yourself and us in the moment in that like couple of weeks did we probably make that we're not, you know, just like, should I do it this way or this way? It's like, do it that way, you know, and then just on. There's no like pining over it or even like, I don't know, should we track it both ways? You know, that's only the stuff that we get into now, Tom and I, with like doing remote production stuff where we're just like, I can't be there. And we're like, well, what if we try this, but we want this person to like, you know, be able to weigh in. Okay, we'll track it with both words or both phrases. You know, that's it now, but that's only because of, you know, the situation. Was very happy that it turned out that way with Upsides, that we were just like, it was instinctual. You know what you were doing. You knew what songs were in front of you, and it was go, go, go. And I think it turned out and has that kind of energy in it, especially playing those songs back. I'm just like, yeah, there was no like crazy amount of thought that went into the nuance, like lyrically, the themes and stuff. I think we spent time on for sure. And that's not to say the songwriting we didn't spend plenty of hours on, you know, but it was a lot of gut decisions in the moment too.
You know, I'm trying to remember how you guys treated each other. It was probably pretty okay, but you know, you were a lot younger then, and you're so old now.
Deanna, cut that out.
I see you guys in the Slack, you know, in the Slack when we were doing recalls on the record, on the new stuff. And I noted how, like, you know, respectful everyone is to everyone else. Because I've seen very much the opposite from other bands. But I mean, you know, someone's like, well, I'm not feeling this, but, you know, I think if everyone else is good with this, then, you know, I'm okay with it too. But my preference is and everyone's so respectful of everyone else. And that definitely has to contribute to you guys like still going, you know, as a band, you know, because you're so kind to each other. And I think a lot of bands could probably learn from that, to like really treat your, you know, bandmates and everyone else involved with like, you know, some respect. You know, you'll have a longer career. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I will certainly say that what you have seen now and what you see with us doing that is definitely decidedly the product of 15 plus years of choosing our battles and having the, you know, interband like brotherly disagreement stuff to extreme levels, right? Like any sort of like weird democratic take on the creative process and songwriting process. There's every like frustration you could ever conceive, right? It is like a family, but in doing that, I think the reason that now, and I've done some searching internally on this as we think back on it. And each record, even though there's like a, you know, you're grappling with expectations, both musically and then trying to, you know, want things that people will enjoy, but also things that fulfill us as a band and where we want to go and grow as we're growing as people. And it becomes a thing where I look back and every record when we're writing, there are always songs where I'm just like, this feels like weird. This feels ingenuine. But I see somebody else across the room that's so incredibly passionate about it on the other side. And it's okay to disagree. There are still things that all of us on records are like, I got outvoted on that, but it doesn't matter in the scheme of things. That's not the hill that I wanted to die on. And that's kind of the thing here with this, and what you're kind of seeing in real time with these mix recalls of us as a band is me getting to the point to be like, instead of being like, well, how do I want it? Do I want it my way? What's my way? Why is my way better? It's kind of just like, hey, I realize I've been wrong before, you know, and I've realized in hindsight that was a better decision. Or if 5 other people in my band are seeing an angle that I don't see with it, then you also have to kind of like trust your team and be like, listen, they're seeing something that I'm not getting it. But to a certain point, why spend any more energy pushing back if everybody, including the people that we're trusting to collaborate, Vince, Steve, anybody else at the time is kind of thumbs upping it and feeling it? cool, then like this might just be a part that's not for me, or anybody else, but it's decidedly a Wonder Years choice, right? And so that's why I think now, and especially too with having someone else mix it, but then also spending myself, like you mentioned, a bunch of us still like do that kind of stuff on the side. It almost is like a freeing thing to be like, you're putting the keys, or someone else in the driver's seat. So why would you nitpick or go back and try to like pull apart every decision just because you want to feel like you had a hand in it, or because you decided the vision that you were thinking just isn't there? And then it's a communication thing. Then it's like, we should have given you that note before. And so that's what I try to do, to be like, we're trusting you to be like, here are these songs. We've brought it to the door, pull the energy out of it. And what is your last take on it? Because maybe you see a world where it's like, hey, I saw that part way back in the mix, but you're like, no, that's incredible. And then that might be a decision that kind of turns, that section completely around. And everybody was kind of missing it, right? Because it was in the background. I love that. And I love handing off that objectivity. And then as a band being able to kind of just say, hey, but like, if you feel that's good, please say that, and knowing when to push back. And so, we're trying to be kind about it, because we've had those knockdown, drag out arguments where like, I'm leaving practice. I hate it, whatever, like, but we always come back from it. And for all of the concern and worry, it's like, is this record going to suck? If this song makes it on the album, is it going to be terrible? Turns out like 7+ times, and how many songs? It's like, it's been okay. And now I'm like, we're able to approach that to be like, even though we spend years putting these songs together, even in that moment, you have to just be like, you have to be okay to let it go. And you have to be okay to be like, you know what? Does the overall impact hit? Job done, right? Like, can I live with it? Can I walk away with it? Is it great? Or is it going to bother me and haunt me for the rest of my life? Then you should speak up, right? And then we will try to facilitate the last thing I want is for someone to have this entire record ruined because this one thing that so viscerally and deeply upsets them, it outvoted. And I think that's you've seen some of that in there too, where it's like, this is not how I saw it, but if everybody else digs it, then this is how the band sees it, and working like that. So it's cool to see, and I appreciate that you've seen it, but it's also not for a lack of previous experiences, I think. But it is something to aim for, that, if you are in a younger band, right, and you've seen plenty, back in the day, you saw plenty of local bands that probably like didn't even finish a song or an EP because they like, pretty much got to the breaking point and were like, singers like, I'm not coming back, whatever it is. But yeah, so we try to be nicer to each other, especially because, it's so much more fulfilling than the latter, where the record's going to get made. It's all going to be okay. And at the end of the day, we can all live with and appreciate how it turned out,
Beautiful words, Case.
Well, it's Vince's fault. You got me feeling all sentimental. I'm going to have to go call my guys right now and just sit down and have like a really heartfelt chat about nothing. Be like, hey man, I love you. No, but I do, man. And it's such a joy to have you in on that, especially because, and you've seen this, it's like you fall in and out with friends, especially in music and other bands. And it's so good to still be able to work with you. And I've said this to you before, it's like you have such a cool energy and such a great perspective. And I think it's decidedly baked into, the Wonder Years sound and just like collective ethos as well in a lot of ways. So for that, I appreciate it. And thank you for hanging out with us. I think hopefully a lot of people will really enjoy what you had to say, dude.
Yeah, I hope that there was some fun nuggets from the past there for you.
Oh, there were some nuggets. We're talking like McDonald's 50-piece, if you remember that back in the day. But yes, Vince, we will hopefully see you soon. And I can't wait for everybody to hear all of the stuff that we've kind of been teasing in the new year. Again, bias here. It's pretty good.
I think it's your best record.
Well, thank you. I think it's your best record. No, but seriously, thank you again. Please tell Rachel we say hello and miss her, and thank her again for lending her skill and voice to that record many, many years ago. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on us.
I am so glad we got to bring you that interview. I think it's an incredible testament to some really important ideas that we talk about here on the show, being willing to open yourself up to additional perspectives as a band or an artist, which we saw the power of here early in our career with Vince, as well as having the flexibility to work with the pros and the cons of any given scenario, whether it be the restrictions of your space or the time frame that you have. I think it's all about focusing your energy on the things that you can control and adapting to those that you can't. And after listening to this episode, if you have any specific questions for Vince, myself, Tom, or about another episode that you've recently listened to, never hesitate to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. We want your feedback. We will try to answer questions as quickly as possible. And if you really enjoyed this episode, you can by all means leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to us on, or just pass this episode along to a friend. That's all we ask. And as always, we will see you next week on The Record Process.